our digital space, end online violence for a GBV-free Sri Lanka.
Data privacy is a bit of a strange concept to Sri Lankans. Ours is a collectivist culture as opposed to being an individualistic one, Ashwini. There is no culture of privacy as such. So in 2022, when the Personal Data Protection Act was enacted, all of a sudden, companies and other individuals and groups sharing personal data of individuals had to now learn about what this act entailed, learn about compliance processes. Although not fully operationalized as of yet, the Personal Data Protection Act, the first of its kind in South Asia, really urged us to look at this culture of privacy. Speak to us about this shift that this act necessitated and about this at the intersection of technology-facilitated gender-based violence, if you can.
Thank you very much, Sonali. It's great to be here. So I'll take a step back and mention something about privacy and protection of personal data. Now, privacy is this umbrella of rights and is not confined only to protection of personal data. Data protection legislation looks at personal data protection and is not essentially all of what privacy can be. It is a lot of things, and I personally believe that if we look at the right to privacy, although there's not one expressly given under the Constitution, it is mentioned under Article 14A as an exception to right to information, which is a fundamental right. So we do understand that privacy is beyond only talking about protection of personal data. But having said that, privacy and technology-facilitated gender-based violence have a lot in common because we are talking about the same rubric. And I can just divide them into a few areas. The first being how it can help prevent technology-facilitated gender-based violence, because we are talking about mechanisms through which privacy can help protect individuals and their personal data. For instance, let's talk about doxing, which is one form of technology-facilitated gender-based violence, and it's entirely to do with a person's private or personal information that is being leaked online. There can also be several other forms of technology-facilitated gender-based violence that can be prevented if we have privacy-respecting technologies in place. And we'll certainly address that, and it cannot be done by just one individual. We need platforms to certainly cooperate with that, but we'll look at that later. But outside of preventing these forms of violence, we can also consider privacy as a tool to remedy those who have been survivors of technology-facilitated gender-based violence, or can provide these legal remedies that are enforceable by using the tools that are available in the legal system. And in that sense, I agree with you that if we look at the statute behind privacy protection, it is certainly limited to protection of personal data because we have the PDPA. Now, the PDPA itself is not yet in force because we have some provisions of it which were brought into force, like the Data Protection Authority, which is actually now established. But outside of that, the provisions are not yet in force. The amendments were passed, and it's expected that it will come into force very soon. In that background, even without a Personal Data Protection Act, there are protection mechanisms available, and as Dr. Ramani just mentioned, they can be utilized to protect individuals who have faced violations of privacy. And outside of these two, it's also important to consider how privacy can really help individuals understand what their rights are. Because many a times, like you rightly mentioned, we are in a culture where sharing passwords, sharing intimate images is not considered something that you cannot do. It is considered quite common and everyday practice. And I've seen so many instances where this has happened. For instance, if we go to a hospital, they ask you for your number and it's usually just screamed out, asking what is your telephone number and what is your date of birth. These are all instances that show us that we need to have a culture of privacy. And when we talk about a culture of privacy, it can only emanate when we start protecting personal data of individuals. And that personal data can be your name, it can be your phone number, it can be your age, it can be anything. When we give importance to these sharing of details, only then can we understand privacy as a concept. Because when we talk about privacy, we talk beyond personal data protection, but we have to start somewhere. And I believe protection of personal data is step one to achieve the full umbrella of rights when it comes to privacy.